All right, so are you ready to dive into this? We're tackling the case that inspired The
Ah,
Exorcist.
yes, the Exorcist case.
This is Roland Doe, and even if someone doesn't know the name, I bet they know the story.
Right.
Haunted house, terrified family, all that creepy stuff.
Yeah, it's become almost like a legend in the paranormal world. But is it true?
Right.
That's what we're going to unpack. What really happened?
Because there's so much to unpack.
There is.
We've got these old news clippings. We've got parts of a book that really dug into this whole thing. Like decades later, there was even a Criminal Minds episode
Yeah.
that was based on this. Somebody thought it was juicy enough for primetime TV.
Oh,
So
yeah.
where do we even
Where do we begin?
begin with a story this big?
Well, we have to start with the man himself, or at least the name they gave him. Roland Doe. Fake name, of course. Meant to protect him.
Which makes this even more of a puzzle to put together.
Right.
We're trying to figure out the truth from stories where the main guy is hidden.
Yeah. And this was the late 1940s. That kind of accusation back then could ruin a family.
Oh, absolutely.
But even with the secrecy, people talked. Especially when you've got priests involved and maybe demons and all this paranormal stuff happening.
See, now that's what gets me, all the stuff that supposedly went down in this house. Like, it's right out of a horror movie, moving objects, creepy sounds,
Right.
everything. Do our sources actually say what it was like to be there?
It's tough because most of what we know is secondhand. Newspaper stories, mostly. They ate that stuff up back then. Good ghost story. But even if we're careful about believing everything, they claim some pretty bizarre stuff.
Okay, like what?
Furniture moving by itself.
Yeah.
Scratches appearing out of nowhere. They even said things flew across the room.
Hold on, flying furniture, that's not just a drafty house. That's like poltergeist activity.
It's definitely not normal, would you say? This is where we got to be careful, use our heads.
Okay.
Part of us wants to believe in this stuff, the unexplainable.
Right.
But we have to look at it from all sides.
Okay, so multiple lenses it is. We've got this mysterious teenager, Roland Doe. We've got possible paranormal activity that's pretty out there, and it's all very hush-hush.
It is.
Where do we go from here?
This is where it gets good. Don't forget, this was a time when religion was a big deal. When people saw something they couldn't explain, they turned to faith for answers.
And that's where the priests come in, right? It's not every day you hear about Lutheran pastors calling in the Catholic Church for backup. You'd think they would just, I don't know, call up their own guys, right?
Right.
But I guess when you think you've got like a demonic roommate situation going on,
Right.
maybe denominations don't really matter as much, huh?
It shows you how scared they were. This family, they're seeing something they don't understand, something terrifying. They're willing to go to anyone for help.
Right, you're not exactly going to look under Exorcist in the phone book.
Exactly.
But they didn't just jump right to the Catholics, did they? I thought I remembered our sources saying they talked to their Lutheran pastor first.
You're right. Luther Miles Schultz. Reverend Schultz was very involved in the beginning of all this. He even took Roland home with him to see what would happen, I guess.
That's either really brave or he really trusted that his furniture was going to stay put.
Right.
But that says something too, doesn't it? Like, they didn't just write it off as some kid fooling around.
Yeah, Reverend Schultz even got in touch with this big-time parapsychologist at Duke University, J.B. Rhine.
Oh, yeah, Ryan. We've talked about him before, Mr. ESP, right. Psychic phenomena. Wasn't he all about being scientific with that stuff?
Yeah, sure.
If anyone could tell what was really going on, it'd be him, right?
He was very skeptical. He thought maybe the adults were, suggesting things or exaggerating.
Ah, so like adding a little drama to the story, a little, I don't know, special effects to the moving furniture.
Yeah, maybe. But get this, even with Ryan saying all that, Reverend Schultz, he still thought something weird was up. He's the one who said they should go to the Catholic priests.
Yeah.
Because,
They had more experience with this kind of thing.
Right, exactly. At the time, they were the exorcism experts,
Yeah.
supposedly.
Wow, so even with the skeptic saying, whoa, slow down there, they still went the exorcism route? They must have been really worried. So what happened when these priests show up?
That's when everything went crazy. Or at least that's what they say. The shaking got worse, things flying around even more, even some of the priests got hurt.
Okay, now that's what I'm talking about. Now we're getting into like real exorcist stuff. But come on, how do you even get hurt during an exorcism? Did the sources say?
Well, one story says one of the priests, he broke his nose.
What?
Something hit him, came out of nowhere, apparently.
Ouch. You'd think they'd at least give those priests, like, helmets or something, just in case of any rogue crucifixes flying around. But seriously, a broken nose, that's hardcore.
Right.
But we have to remember, right? We're getting all this secondhand. It's like a game of telephone. Who knows what really happened versus how many times the story got, I don't know, spiced up along the way.
Exactly.
But even then, even if some of it's exaggerated,
Right.
there's still a lot of weird stuff to explain.
Absolutely. And that's what makes it so fascinating. What really happened? We want to know, right?
Right.
It makes you think about what's possible, what we really understand about this stuff.
So where does that leave us? Do we just chalk it up to, I don't know, people getting carried away, a few good special effects?
Right.
Or is there more to it?
Well, before we jump ahead, we should talk about some other explanations people have come up with over the years.
Other explanations? Okay, so we're not talking demons and holy water anymore.
Not necessarily. One thing people bring up is, could it have been faked?
Like, you mean Roland Doe was, what, staging the whole thing?
Some people think so.
Yeah.
Kids that age, especially teenagers, they want attention.
Right.
Or maybe they're trying to, I don't know, get control somehow. And remember, this kid had been through a lot. He was dealing with loss, change.
So it's like maybe he wasn't possessed. Maybe he was just really good at making everyone think he was.
Right.
I mean, I can see how a teenager could get creative. But to fool that many adults, priests even.
And that's what the skeptics say. There's no real proof, no photos, no recordings, just people saying what they remember.
Right. And those memories could be, a little fuzzy, especially with all that fear and wanting to believe in something.
It's like that saying, what is it? A good story beats the truth. Something like that.
Right. But even if we say, okay, some of it's exaggerated, that's still a lot of weird stuff happening. Do you really think everyone was fooled? Or that Roland Doe was that good of an actor?
It's possible, but there's another way to look at it. Psychological stress.
Okay, how does that fit in?
Imagine this young guy, he's grieving. Maybe he feels like nobody gets him.
Right.
Those emotions, they have to go somewhere.
So you're saying instead of screaming into a pillow, he's, I don't know, making the furniture dance. Okay, maybe not literally, but I get what you mean. Like the house is a reflection of what's going on inside him.
Exactly. And back then, nobody really understood mental health. So if you were acting out, having these problems, people didn't think, oh, maybe he needs help. They thought, oh, maybe it's something else.
Something supernatural, you mean?
Right. It makes you wonder, what would happen if this was today?
Mm-hmm.
Would we even be talking about exorcisms?
Mm-hmm.
Or would this be, a therapist's case?
Right, right. It's a totally different world now.
Exactly.
So I gotta ask, after all this digging, do we know what really happened with Roland Doe? Possessed,
Right.
prankster, just a kid who needed some help.
The truth is, we probably never will know. And you know what? That's kind of what makes it so interesting. It's like a puzzle with some pieces missing.
Yeah.
We're left wondering, what do we believe? What's really real?
So what started as this, I don't know, haunted house story, it's really got us thinking about all this other stuff. Psychology, history, how stories change when people tell them.
Yeah, right.
It makes you realize that sometimes the best mysteries are the ones nobody solves.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
It keeps us curious, asking questions, reminds us that even with all our fancy science, we don't have all the answers.
That's a good point to end on. So to everyone listening, we want to know, what do you think happened to Roland Doe? And how do we look at these kinds of stories now, knowing what we know about the world? Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and until next time, happy deep diving.